hand-drawn animation alive.
Well, and I really like Len's comment about there are certain types of stories that lend themselves to the computer versus 2D animation, and you got to go with what's the best storytelling technique. I did a lot of work on the on projects related to the Ninja Turtle movie that just came out in March, and Ninja Turtle, that movie was stunning in computer animation. The rain scene on the rooftop, where you're seeing all of the drops of rain on Leonardo's shell, is one of the achievements, the great achievements in computer animation thus far. The Imagi, the studio that created it, has received a lot of awards and commendations for that scene.
Can I ask you a question about the fighting? Was that motion capture? Was there motion capture used in that?
I think so.
Okay, so there were still actual stuntmen with martial arts skills contributing to it. But they didn't have to do their stunts in 100 pounds of latex.
Right.
Well, here's a question for Len, and John and Jake, both of you can answer it. Len, you've worked as a writer. You've also worked as an editor on comic books, and of course, as we brought up, Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is pretty much the miniseries that all miniseries is judged by. How has comics changed over the last 20 years since Crisis came out?
The audience has changed. I mean, right now, DC is, everything they're doing this year is devoted to undoing the Crisis. All of that work is being negated. By the end of this year or early next year, it will be as if the Crisis never happened. And part of it is because the audience has changed. When the Crisis was devised, the idea was to create a DC universe that was accessible to newcomers, to people who did not read comics and had not read for years. You come into a comic shop or a newsstand, back in the days when there were newsstand comics, and be able to figure out how come there were 5 Flashes or 3 Green Lanterns. It was designed to create a simpler world so that there was access to new readers. We don't get that many new readers anymore. The overwhelming majority of comic book readers today are comic fans, people who are reading them since before the Crisis, who don't need this explained to them. Most comic books today are sold in comic book shops. So you've got a different marketplace and a different agenda to work with.
Do you feel that, one thing that Metropolis sort of impresses upon me is that comic books are appealing more and more to a market that is sort of self-contained and like a snake eating its own tail. And out here, there is an entire world of people that don't read comics but who love the characters. Do you feel like they're being underserved? The the general audience, mainstream audience, is sort of being underserved by comics? In terms of, there's a lack of jumping on points, a lack of done-in-ones, a lack of...
Well, the lack of done-in-ones drives me crazy. I actually know several writers who in the last couple of years have turned in done-in-one stories to editors. I love this issue, it's great. It starts, middle, end, one issue we're out. And the editor just told them, good, they'll go back and make it 4 issues. Part of the problem is a lot of what is driving the market today is ancillary sales. It's the trade paperbacks. It's the collections. I don't want to start going into numbers, it's not important here, but they make a huge difference in the success or failure of various companies. And so many of the books now are being designed and storylines to run 4 issues, 6 issues, however many issues they need to be able to collect them all later and sell the collection in perpetuity. Those things will stay in print. And it's changed the storytelling of the industry, not to my advantage. I think it would take too long to tell a story now in comics.
I think part of what's, you're talking about undoing the Crisis and that sort of thing. I think part of what is driving the undoing is the people that are the top writers in the industry now are trying to tell the stories that they remember from when they were a kid reading the books, and they were pre-Crisis readers for the most part. And so, you have, and I think it's cyclical that way. I think in perhaps 10 years you're going to be back to the darker Dark Knight, Watchmen era. I hope not too. you know, Supergirl is my hands down favorite character of all time, and I would kill to write Supergirl for DC because she's not the dark, sinister character for the most part. But I think it's a nostalgic effort on the part of the top creators in the industry right now. You know, if that makes sense.
You know, if the books sell, I mean, the bottom line, and I think the sales commercial about it, is that we need the books to sell.
Right.
If they stop selling, the business goes away, and everybody loses. So you've got to find ways to tell stories to an audience that already knows much of what you're telling them, and still keep them entertained.
And to tell you the truth, I think projects like Smallville and the Spider-Man movies have affected the stories that are told right now too, because the executives in Hollywood, the producers, they come and they develop a project or a property based on the comics that they read when they were 10, 15 years old. And again, those were those throwback pre-crisis.
I think comic books. I think comic books would probably be around even if their sales didn't warrant their survival, because they're often used just as idea farms for Hollywood. So I think that's one function that actually supports the comic book industry.
Okay, we have a call. We have a caller. No, we have a question. I'd like to ask Mr. Wine how he feels about the changes that Alan Moore did to Carlton.
Some folks don't remember, I was the editor who hired him. So I was in charge of that book when he made those changes. And if I hadn't liked what he wanted to do, I wouldn't have wanted to do it.
Can I just have one closing comment on the Hollywood idea farm? I agree with you to a point, but I think we saw something in the last year that is going to perhaps negate a little bit the comics existing as an idea farm, and that's Heroes. Heroes was so successful, and it's comic based in principle or idea, right? But it's an original property that was created in Hollywood, and it was phenomenally successful. And I'm scared that studios are going to see that and realize they don't have to pay Marvel or DC rights to have a successful comic book based property anymore. That being said, I love Heroes. I'm wearing the hat.
Let me respond to that. Actually, I love Heroes too. I've watched all the episodes. But a question I ask people all the time when we talk about Hollywood is, what is the job of a Hollywood executive? Does anybody in the audience have a clue? What is the job of a typical Hollywood executive?
To cry after 3 days in jail and get out?
Executive, not celebrity.
Oh, right.
The principal job of a Hollywood executive is to keep his job. That sounds silly, but that's really it. These people are the ones who greenlight projects. And as a way of protecting their job, what they call plausible deniability, the vast majority of why you see products, TV shows that are remakes of old TV shows, or movies that are remakes of old TV shows, so much comes from another source, is so that the executive will, if the project fails, they'll be able to go, oh look, I took this hot property here, this successful thing, how did I know it would fail? It's all to protect their job. So I don't think it's going to happen, because if you create a lot of stuff on the whole cloth, you're responsible for failures. You can't blame something else.
Gotcha.
We got another question here.
I hate again to bring up the Hollywood stranglehold on the comic book industry, but how do you guys feel about films like Sin City or V for Vendetta or 300, just in terms of filmmaking of movies that aren't quite regular film but look like comic books? I mean, what are your feelings on that kind of...
After seeing 300, pretty much everybody I know in comics started doing sit-ups and going on diets.
Even me.
300, that was 1,800 abs in that movie.
Well, I mean, V for Vendetta is much more traditionally made. I think there's a place for those types of things. I thought both Sin City and 300 look spectacular, but I don't think they're going to start a trend. They will not become the norm. They will still be the odd thing that's made from some, especially from directors whose obsession is to make the comic.